Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Speaking of crazy Polish politicians, this happened about a month ago, but I've been dying to ask you about it. I want to ask you about this fucking guy.
Panie pośle, co pan robi? Panie pośle, co pan robi? Panie pośle, co pan robi? Jak tak można było?
Proszę zejść na dół, proszę państwa, zejście na dół, to się musi przewietrzyć. Wstyd powinno być tym, proszę państwa, którzy uczestniczą w aktach satanistycznego kultu. Proszę państwa, proszę zejść na dół. To mój telefon, panie pośle, spokojnie. Proszę zejść na dół, proszę państwa.
Woo! Wow. That was crazy. Okay, who is this guy Braun, and why the hell did he do that?
Explain. Just to make things clear, there's no relation between him and Eva Braun.
That was my second question.
It's clear. No, but it might surprise you, and I think your viewers actually know him very well.
You do?
Braun, yes, he's actually a friend of mine. He's the head. He's the head of the so-called Crown Party, which is one of the coalition parties making up the Confederation Party in the current Polish parliament. Confederation Party is considered to be the only right-wing conservative, sort of libertarian opposition in the Polish parliament. So I won't go into the details of Confederation, but let me try to sort of explain why he did it, what happened, and sort of the political repercussions of that. First of all, my temperament is different than Grzegorz Braun. So personally, I wouldn't do what he did. I think that was a little bit over the top,
maybe.
Because unfortunately, the problem right now with Grzegorz is he's been stripped of his immunity and he's going to court. So instead of preparing election campaigns, which we have two coming up in Poland, we have local elections in April and we have important European parliamentary elections coming up in June, where he could have, I think, had a lot of potential with his party and with Confederation to make some waves. But right now his situation is a little bit complicated.
Basically, have they charged him with a crime, and what did they charge him with over that incident?
The charges being made with that specific incident is that, according to, I forgot what article of Polish code it was, he interrupted a religious ceremony. Now, here's the thing. The organizers of the lighting of that Hanukkah candle, which is a fairly recent event in Polish parliamentary history, started I think a decade ago. So it's not that, it's not that old. It didn't take place in the 90s and sure as hell didn't take place during the communist years. So it's something new. And the organizers themselves did not state that this was a religious ceremony. It's sort of like a cultural, Jewish sort of Disneyland in a way. It's cultural. It's Christmas, there's Hanukkah, but it was not formally a religious ceremony. And that's what he's being charged with, that this was a religious ceremony.
I see.
Now the funny thing is that Grzegorz Braun obviously has his views. You can discuss them. You can call him an anti-Semite, a Nazi, whatever. But he pointed out to a very important sort of dichotomy in the narrative of the current Polish parliament. See, the current Polish speaker of the parliament and a lot of his allies in the new government, there's a crucifix hanging above the door of the entrance of the plenary sessions of the parliament. It's fairly big. They said, we got to take it down because separation of church and state, that can't be there. That's religious symbol. We have to take it down. Okay, I don't agree with that, but it's a logical, it's an argument. But these same people have nothing against a Hanukkah candle being lit in the parliament. So
I see.
you're against this, but I don't understand why. You should, if you're against this, you should be against this also, right? And no, it'll be like, reading of the Quran in the Polish parliament. No religion, then no religion, right? So there's a lot of discrepancies here. So first of all, the organizers didn't consider it a religious ceremony. The prosecutor says he interrupted a religious ceremony. Grzegorz calls it an MP intervention. And the other thing is that, you're all spouting at that crucifix above the door there, but you're all attending. And what happened was, after he doused the flames, a day later, they lit the Hanukkah candle again. And everybody from the president, the speaker of the Sejm, I think the prime minister, and basically most of the MPs from the current ruling party, they all converged there. It sort of looked like an apology tour in a way. Now, obviously, the optics, they are what they are.
Well, he sprayed a woman in the face. That poor Jewish lady that he sprayed in the face.
That lady, she is actually from Poland. I think she has a Jewish background, Jewish ethnicity, at least 50% of her. But there is still discussion whether he intentionally doused her or whether she just
I was wondering, did he mean to do that?
That'll probably have some meaning in court. From what he's saying, he says he didn't douse her intentionally, that apparently she was trying to pull him away and it just moved into her face. So I'll leave that to the court. But generally speaking, as I said, I probably wouldn't have done that. I think I was a little bit over the top because it complicates
just a little bit,
issue.
You think?
But on the other hand, the response that came from this, the groveling to what I would call our local Israel lobby, it was just way out of line. I mean, okay, he did what he did, but do you really have to bring the entire apparatus of state to light a Hanukkah candle while at the same time you're criticizing the cross above the entrance to the plenary? It's hypocrisy, basically.
Well, at least now I understand why he did it. He was just kind of calling out the hypocrisy, but he probably could have found a better way to go about it.
He was, but there's also, and as I said, this is a topic for a different discussion, because the group of Jewish organizations that organize the lighting of this candle every year comes from a Jewish, religious organization or sect called Chabad Lubavitch. And Chabad Lubavitch are the guys who had those funny tunnels discovered a few weeks back in New York. I don't know if you heard about that.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same group. And if you delve back into what the founder of Chabad Lubavitch, one rabbi, I think his name was Mendelssohn, but don't quote me on that. He wrote some pretty. I looked through his works because they're sort of like an offshoot of mainline Judaism, considered orthodox. Some of his writing about non-Jewish people, I think, could be considered by any regional observer to be racist. So I leave it up to the reader. Look it over yourself. His texts are online. Plus the fact that Chabad Lubavitch in New York, after this tunnel issue, which was reported very extensively, and we still don't know what was happening in there. But the memes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Jews coming out of the tunnels, that was just hilarious.
There are some great memes about that.
Yes. Nobody really knows what was happening there. And that soiled mattress coming out of there, what the heck was that all about, right?
The hell was that?
And then if you go back in history and you look at the history of that particular group, because the Chabad headquarters are actually in Brooklyn, they have a history of taking, liking children, so to say. Sort of Epsteinish Biden type vibes there, with a couple of, I think, of their rabbis or some of their organizational people being convicted of pedophilia. Those are things for, our readers and listeners to look up into, but there's definitely a stink there. So that organization is the same one, basically, their Polish chapter that organized the lighting of that Hanukkah candle. And it's funny because, 3 weeks after that, the whole tunnel thing explodes and everybody's like, hey.
Isn't that weird? Then everybody knew who they were, but before that,
maybe Brown was
did.
onto something, so who knows? But as I said, my stance is that...
Can we just back up a little bit? Because I'm hearing these kinds of accusations thrown around about pedophilia and children in tunnels. It sounds very QAnon. So can you point us in the direction of some references that can substantiate any of these kinds of things that go beyond, what I would view as sort of a cliche and an anti-Semitic trope?
Yeah. The tunnel issue itself I don't know what the tunnels are serving for because there's still an ongoing investigation. And it was funny to see the NYPD cops who came there. Like they were surprised themselves. I mean, what's this being used for?
It was
But, I mean,
some sort of real estate thing. They were trying to
different
build
buildings
extra
together, and they
I
hope
weren't
so.
able to get-
illegal
I hope so,
apartments underground.
Yeah.
Apparently, they weren't able to get building permits or whatever, and they went ahead
Yeah.
and started constructing these things anyway. That's one of the explanations.
I heard a version it was apparently built during COVID so they could practice their religious services and so
That
on.
too,
So the cops wouldn't
right.
get at them.
They
I
could
don't
get
know, to tell
around
you
the
truth.
lockdowns that way.
I have no idea what the tunnels are for. However, if you Google the Chabad Lubavitch community in Brooklyn, there were headlines from the New York Post, from the Jerusalem Post, from a few years back. I can't reference you the particular articles right now, but I'm pretty sure Mr. Google will help with this, where people associated with that branch of Chabad Lubavitch in New York had problems, were in court, were suspected of. I think there was at least one conviction in the 90s of a guy who was engaged in pedophilia. So it could be tied into this. It doesn't have to be, but there's a stink there. And
But yeah, the internet went wild, especially when they saw the stained mattress. Every conspiracy theory in the world, and a lot of them were pretty anti-Semitic. And nobody seems to know what the hell's going on, but everybody's got a theory about it. And speaking of apology tours and anti-Semitism, or being accused of being an anti-Semite, Elon Musk was in your neck of the woods this week, came to Auschwitz, and I'm sure most people have seen the footage, but I'll just play you a quick clip of it.
How do you balance the necessity for free speech with all these critiques about, what is hate speech? What is anti-Semitism?
It's difficult to get to perfect truth, and sometimes people have different interpretations of truth, but one can always aspire to be as accurate as possible and to minimize the error between what is being said and reality. Relentless pursuit of the truth is the goal with X.
Interesting. Relentless pursuit of the truth, whatever truth is. A lot of different perspectives on that. Any comments?
Well, Ben Shapiro is not somebody I particularly like, so maybe I won't comment on him. But I think Ben represents the epitome of American neoconservatism with a lot of Zionist elements. But when it comes to Elon, this personal choice. I mean, I am kind of angry that he didn't want to meet with me. I'd love to talk to Elon Musk, but I hope, because there's a lot of discussion going on about what happened and why this happened right now in Poland. I mean, if this doesn't precipitate in free speech being limited on X pertaining to issues such as Gaza, Israel, basically free speech, then you can say, okay, it was a symbolic visit to prove to the world that I'm not an anti-Semite. But there are a lot of questions being raised because, a few weeks back, there was that whole issue where the ADL wanted to shut him down. They wanted to take out ads from Twitter. They were appealing. I mean, Greenblatt was all over the place saying that we have to take down X. I hope this is not in connection with that, and that Elon didn't, they didn't make him an offer he couldn't refuse. And now he's going to be shutting down dissident voices on Twitter because, for example, they're criticizing the Israel lobby in the United States. So whatever Elon does, I don't really care as long as he doesn't shut down free speech on X on account of this. Whatever, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, censorship, media control, these are issues that are front and center, especially right now, and we're seeing it in Poland right now because the new government is exerting new control over your television stations, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, that was expected because the Polish state TV, which is TVP, they have it's a huge corporation. It's three main television channels. You have regional channels, you have a sports channel, you have a history channel, culture channel, movie channel. It's all under the banner of TVP, Telewizja Polska, or Polish television. So every time a new government comes in, a new government also comes into the state television. That's to be expected. But the reason, the way they did it this time was kind of, they really wanted to get in there. So they had to really force their way sort of into the into the state television, even though at the end of the day they would have taken over, but they wanted to really do it quickly. And as I said, it's part of this acceleration of wokeness in Poland, because one of the first things that happened when they took over the state television was one of the presenters that came in was a very liberal woman. She's got tattoos all over her. She looks like a big bird took a crap on her, Then you have this huge gathering of LGBT youth that came to the morning program of the main TVP station. They're all sitting there with rainbow flags. Oh my God, finally we're liberated. We could come on television after, 10 years of fascist government and so on. So, the pendulum swings the other way, and all of a sudden you bring your people into the state television. The next elections, pendulum swings another way. You bring another group of people associated with the ruling party. So that's unfortunately the nature of state television, sort of like the CBC in Canada. Although, has the CBC ever been even slightly conservative? I'm not sure. So even if the conservatives are in power, they're still Justin Trudeau, right? But in Poland, at least formally the narrative changes, and you do get a change in basically the entire set of reporters and media directors in state television and state radio, by the way.
It's interesting to see how the politics quickly, the dots get connected between what's going on in Ukraine to what's going on in Gaza. Can you just comment on those lines connecting?
The connection that I'm seeing first and foremost is that Israel is at the head of the line, and the establishment is trying to basically, let's forget about this guy Zelensky. That was yesterday. Today we're concentrating on the Houthis, Yemen, Israel, and so on. So I think the connection is that the American establishment, the neocons, the deep state, the military industrial complex is tired of Ukraine, and they really want to move on to something else. And, who would have thought last year that John Kirby would be saying at press conferences, we have no money left. We have nothing left to give to Ukraine. Meanwhile, we're giving, what was it? That supplemental deal that they didn't go to Congress was, I think, couple of million that Blinken signed off without the approval of Congress that went to Israel just before Christmas, citing urgent national security requirements, which was total BS. But yeah, I think Israel right now is the main issue that will decide what happens in the elections. I think Ukraine right now is a sideshow, and I think it's become sort of, not cool and not hip anymore to talk about Ukraine. I mean, nobody's going to Kiev anymore. Donald Tusk is, but that's Donald Tusk. I don't know whether he really believes in what he's saying, or he's just basically trying to position himself as the next proxy against Russia. But I think the world's attention right now, especially with the ICJ ruling coming on Friday on Gaza, is going to be much concentrated on the Middle East. But that does not mean that Russia is stopping, because they are in a position of active defense right now. And if we are to believe what our common friend Scott Ritter is reporting from his recent visit in Russia and discussions with officials in the Donbass and military officials, in the spring, there most likely will be a huge offensive on the side of the Russians. There will be a total crumbling of the Ukrainian military. And by September, apparently, this is what Scott is saying, they're expecting the war to be over. Now, the open question is whether Zelensky and his regime will survive that, because there are apparently rumors floating around that he's going to be evacuated to Western Ukraine and set up a sort of government, not necessarily in exile, but in a different location in Lviv, and continue to fight the sort of partisan insurgency from Lvov while the Russians take over Kiev. I don't think they're going to go as far as Kiev. I would probably.
I heard they were going to move the whole government, the new government of the new Ukraine, to Lvov, and basically everything west of Lvov would be the new Ukraine. I mean, they're putting out feelers right now as we speak. It's Zelensky saying, "I'm just uncle. I've had about enough."
Let's not forget that Western Ukraine is the hotbed of Ukrainian nationalism. So they're going to be feeling right at home in Lvov. You know, Eastern Ukraine, Kiev still has a lot of the Russianness in it. I have a lot of Orthodox people. I mean, Kiev was actually the place where Russia began as a country. Kiev and Rus. That's where it all spread out to the east, right? But Lvov, or Lviv, is the hotbed, the center of Ukrainian nationalism, directed against Poland, against the Jews, and against the Russians. So it's going to be really hilarious if a Jewish Ukrainian president moves to Lvov, to the hotbed of Ukrainian nationalism, and directs a government.
Isn't that just rich?
That is hilarious.
Truly.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.